everyone, Chef Sarah here with the Sylvia Center. We're a nonprofit specializing in providing food and nutrition education in New York City and Columbia County. If you have not subscribed to our YouTube channel yet, please do. That way you can get more videos and recipes like this one. Today is our last day of our Noodle Passport series, and I am making veggie mac and cheese. So I'm going to go wash my hands and then we'll get started. Okay, so I'm back and I'm going to talk about the ingredients that I have in front of me, and then I'm going to get started. So for this veggie mac and cheese, the main vegetables I'm going to use are cauliflower and kale. You could really alter this a lot. You could use broccoli instead of the cauliflower. You could use Swiss chard or collard greens. Any type of leafy green would be really great in here. You could also add squash. You could do roasted butternut squash or delicata squash. So many other vegetables you could add in here. You could add peppers. You could add corn. Really, any veggie you could think of would go really great in this dish. I also have onions and garlic. As you know, both of those ingredients add tons of flavor. For our herbs, I have green onions and flat leaf parsley. You could do whatever herbs you want. You could add rosemary and thyme, cilantro. It's really up to you. Sage would be really yummy in here as well. And here I have cheese. I have Parmesan and cheddar. I like to mix this up. I kind of always add different cheeses just to see play around with textures and taste whenever I'm making macaroni and cheese. I actually really like using smoked cheese, like smoked Gouda or smoked cheddar. Would be really, really amazing in here as well. I also have some whole wheat pasta. This is already cooked, so it makes it really nice and easy when we go to make this. And for our cheese sauce, I have milk and I have flour and butter. And we're going to make a roux with this, which if you don't know what a roux is, you will hear very soon. I will teach you all about it. Salt and pepper, always important. I have a little bit of cayenne, just add a little spice. That is obviously very optional and up to you. And a little olive oil to saute our veggies in. Okay, let's get started. To start our mac and cheese, I have oil and onions in our pan. I'm using olive oil, but you could use canola or vegetable if you prefer. And these onions, as you can see, I'm just letting them get a little bit caramelized and softer. So altogether, these onions took about 4 to 5 minutes, and you can see each step of the way they're getting a little bit browner. At this point, once those have been in there for about 4 or 5 minutes, I add in my garlic. So I'm just giving that a stir, and I'm going to let that go for about 1 more minute before I add in my other veggies. So today, like I said, we're using cauliflower and kale. But this would be where you would add in any of those other veggies that you want to saute. So whether it's squash or other leafy greens, peppers, any of those veggies that you might have chosen. So once I have the kale and the cauliflower in the pan, I'm just going to stir that around. I'm trying to really just kind of wilt that kale down, and I want to get a little bit of caramelization on that cauliflower if possible. You could also roast this if you prefer, but today I like to do this in the pan, but you really have either option. So it's just in this pan getting nice and warm and cooked through, and hopefully some of that cauliflower will get some nice little brown caramelization spots because that would add lots of flavor. This is also when I add salt and pepper. I always like to season twice. So I like to add the salt and pepper onto these veggies, and I'm going to add more salt and pepper at the end once we make our cheese sauce. Okay, so these are going to get put to the side, and it's time to make that cheese sauce. I didn't worry about getting the pan super cleaned out because there's so many flavors from the onion and garlic, and we want to hold on to all the flavor that we possibly can. So don't worry about giving the pan a clean out in between. Okay, so you can see that I added in butter into my pan. So we're going to make what we like to call a roux. So this is a great culinary thing to know. A roux is flour and a fat, so usually oil or butter. And a roux is what you would use when you're making any type of cream soup or gravy, cheese sauce. So once you learn this technique, you could do so many different things with it. As you can see, I just mixed the flour and the butter together. And I'm going to use a spoon to make sure everything's off the sides there while that last little bit of butter melts in. So I'm just making sure it kind of forms a little bit of a paste. I always make sure this cooks for at least a minute. I don't like the taste of raw flour, and I'm sure you don't either. So by letting this cook for a minute, it's going to take any raw flour taste out of this roux. So you can see I'm just really mixing that together and making sure that it just gets a little bit cooked. So this is when I switch over to my whisk. I'm adding in a little bit of milk. You can see I added the tiniest little bit and it just absorbed right away into that roux. And you can see that second bit of milk did the same thing. So I'm adding it in slowly like this, so it really has time to become a nice, thick, creamy cheese sauce, and then it won't be thin, because we don't want it to look like milk. We want it to look like a nice, creamy sauce. I like to go in and use a spoon or spatula to make sure the sides are really nice and scraped, because we do not want this lumpy. You can see there was a nice big lump that was on the side, and there are a few more. So by using that whisk, it's going to break down any of those lumps. So we have a creamy sauce, not a lumpy sauce. Because I don't know about you, but I do not want a lumpy cheese sauce. So every time I add milk, I'm just giving it a really good stir, and you can see it's getting super thick and amazing. Each time you can see little bubbles form, and that's going to help just to also make sure that texture is really, really nice. And I'm kind of going back and forth with that spatula and the whisk. And once again, just adding a little bit more milk and making sure each time that those lumps are getting broken down. Okay. So after this, you can see I'm kind of really making sure I'm getting a really nice whisk. And this is when I go back with that spoon, give it kind of one last really good scrape, just to make sure none of that roux got stuck to the sides, and that'll be a nice even sauce. And then once again, kind of one last whisk. Before I add in any cheese, I make sure I see a couple little bubbles. You really want this to simmer, because it's not going to come to its full potential until it has that last simmer. And you can see right in the center, we get those little bubbles I was talking about. And after one last whisk, this is when we're going to add in our cheese. So once again, I'm using cheddar and Parmesan, but definitely experiment with this. Use whatever kind of cheese you want. You can use, most cheeses would be really, really great in this. So definitely give your favorite cheese a try in here. You also see I added a little bit of salt and pepper, and I added a pinch of cayenne pepper. You could add red pepper flakes instead, but today I had cayenne on hand, so I used that. If you don't want any spice, you could leave that out for sure. Or if you wanted to, do something different, you could add in any of your favorite spices in at this point as well. So I'm giving this a really good mix. I want all that cheese to really melt, and you can see how perfect that is. You could use this for a lot of different things at this point. If you like cheese on broccoli, it would be really good. You could use this as the base for, nachos, or there's so many things you could use with this cheese sauce. It's so, so yummy. I went ahead and just added in all my veggies and my herbs. And I'm also going to add in all that whole wheat pasta. One thing, I made sure to not overcook this pasta, but since it does get cooked again, we want to make sure that it doesn't get super soft. So always make sure if you're cooking pasta a second time that it does not get overcooked that first time. And after a nice big mix here, you can see how that cheese is super gooey and beautiful. Okay, so my mac and cheese is done. It looks amazing. And I'm going to show you two different directions that you can go from here. So the first way is to just put this in a bowl and eat it as is. So right now, that's perfect, amazing. It would taste so good. You could also just put a little extra cheese on top or extra herbs. Another way that you can serve this, and I really like doing this, is I fill up a baking dish. You could use really anything that could go in the oven. You could even do this right in this pan here. I'm using just a really simple cake pan because I just want to do a small portion today to show you. So I have my macaroni and cheese in my cake pan, and here I have breadcrumbs. So these are just simple panko breadcrumbs. You could use just any type of breadcrumbs, Italian breadcrumbs, whatever you might have around, and a little bit of olive oil. So I'm just going to drizzle. You could also use butter, but today I'm going to use olive oil, and I'm just going to give that just a quick stir. The reason that you want to use olive oil or butter is just so that it will get really nice and brown and crispy in the oven. So I'm just mixing that together. You could also throw some herbs in here, spices, whatever you like. And then I'm just going to top my pan of macaroni and cheese just like this. I'm going to pop this in the oven. Since this is small, it's probably only going to take about 20 minutes to get nice and golden brown. So I'll be right back and we'll see how it looks. Okay, so both versions of our veggie mac and cheese are ready. Our first one here is that one I put in the bowl right from the pan. And this one here is the one that I topped with breadcrumbs and got it really nice and toasty in the oven. So this took about 20 minutes at 350 degrees, but the timing might differ depending on the pan and the size of mac and cheese that you're making. This has been a really fun recipe because once again, like all of our recipes in our Noodle Passport, there's a million different ways you could change these, add a bunch of different veggies, spices, seasonings, and with this one you can even decide if you want it baked in the oven or eaten right from the pan. Well, thank you so much for joining me for the last 8 weeks for our Noodle Passport series. I hope you learned a lot and hopefully you get to cook a lot of amazing things. Have a wonderful day, everyone. Bye.